It's time now, and we're joined here by James Creedon for Media Watch. Good evening, James.
Hi, Sanam.
You're starting with the opening of that France-Africa summit today.
That's right. And in the French press, there's one word that's being used to describe this, which has a lot of connotations. It's a sort of neologism. Russe-Afrique. Now, in France, a term has been used for many decades called, which is France-Afrique. France and Africa conflated into one word, France-Afrique. And it's a word that is basically used to suggest perhaps slightly underhanded dealings or influences that would be a throwback to the colonial era. So, Le France-Afrique basically is what followed, I suppose, France's colonial enterprise in Africa, and the term sort of refers to the sort of a backlog of or a certain continuing of certain practices that will be colonial. So what they're saying here is Russe-Afrique is being inaugurated by Vladimir Putin, and that it's anything but soft power. So the Russian authorities in the Kremlin have been quick to sort of present this as something that is just a civilized a series of bilateral sort of meetings with people on a bilateral basis or on a continental basis, and it's nothing to do with interest. But in this article in Libération, they talk about the extent to which some of the dealings are quite murky. They give one example in the Central African Republic last year, Sanam, where 3 independent Russian journalists were assassinated because they were investigating the mining activities of one Russian oligarch, Evgeny Prigozhin, and his company Wagner got lots of mining deals in Central African Republic, Madagascar and elsewhere. And in their investigations into those dealings, they lost their lives. So it's not all as sort of shiny and diplomatic niceties as it might seem. That this is an article in the Africa Report that refers to that. Meanwhile, in this piece in the Malian press, an editorial by Adam Thiam, he's saying, look, it's normal that African leaders who have been invited to Sochi would go. There's a curiosity to study this new Russian offering, but that because so many of the heads of state who are going, over 40, are sort of going to be representing their own interests, as often is the case with Africa, there's going to be too many divisions, and that this is something that will benefit Russia. Just one partner on the other side of the table. So that's one editorial kind of sort of saying, look, of course, Africans would be interested in this, but perhaps not enough of a united front. This is a piece saying that Russia, this is a tweet in response to the kind of Russe-Afrique criticisms, saying that these are anti-Putin fantasies. The USSR helped to liberate politically many countries that have been colonized in Africa, and so essentially a good partner. There's lots of different reactions to it online, some cynical, some less cynical. This tweet here saying, again, we're seeing a whole continent summoned sort of to other lands. This in the aftermath of a China summit as well, a China-Africa summit, and various other summits as well. So some a little bit tired by all of that. Anyway, lots more on that, Sanam, but perhaps not time to go into everything.
We'll move on to one of our top stories, James. Of course, that's the ongoing protests, nationwide protests across Lebanon against the political elite. And one image is very much doing the rounds on social media.
This is an image from today, and it's not the only image like this, but it shows a protester embracing a member of the army, and a lot of news websites in Lebanon have picked up on that piece. It took place in Zouk, and indeed there's a video as well accompanying it, which has been circulating on social media, and there are tears as well in this scene. The soldier is actually weeping, and so I suppose it shows the extent to which perhaps some members of the army really do sympathise with people taking to the streets of Lebanon. So that's something I think the authorities would probably rather avoid seeing in terms of trying to control those protests. But it's not the only soldier who has been videoed or photographed crying during the protests. So that obviously images like that go viral pretty quickly.
And of course, the reason for that, James, is this is on one occasion where the protests are going beyond the sectarian lines that we usually see across the country. Let's moving on to the film Joker, which has been inspiring some of those taking part in the protests in Lebanon.
That's right. Very, very quickly on this. So The Joker, the film, which is basically a prelude to Batman, the image of the Joker has been used not just in Lebanon, but also in Chile and even in Hong Kong, Sanam. So this is something that is actually inspiring quite a lot of protesters. It is because the character in the film it has been maligned by the authorities, not dealt with well, and turns into a monster as a result. So I think protesters are referring to the fact that if there is a lot of anger being expressed, it is because of the way in which perhaps the social services or the authorities have dealt with those who are maligned by society. So it's interesting to see that that image is being used in Chile, in Lebanon, in Hong Kong and elsewhere. It's truly a meme that has gone global, but a meme with a lot of symbolism.
Picking up on that anti-establishment momentum happening across
Absolutely.
the globe. Thank you so much for being
Thanks,
with
Matt.
us, James.